Show. Hey, Joan, how are you?
I'm
I'm
good. Long
glad you're
time no
good.
see.
I know. I'm glad you're able to share some of your valuable sales time with us and get out here and let the people meet you. They're tired of seeing Matt and I. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, I guarantee that.
Guarantee
Oh
that.
no.
Oh my gosh.
Who
Well,
could be
hey,
tired of you too?
everybody.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in our world. I think this kind of brings up a little bit about school boards or even boards of education, county boards, city boards, all
Right.
that kind of stuff that's out there. We're seeing some little elections in certain parts of the country, and people are kind of saying, hey, this isn't what we signed up for. We want some change. And we're getting a lot of calls on teaching ethics in school boards. So I think I think you brought up this little issue where the Valentine's Day cards went around and how the school board is handling those types of issues. There's just a lot of talk about different things and where we're supposed to go with this. And so, uh, Joan, what was that? Was it in Ohio? No, don't say Ohio. Ohio's had enough.
No.
How's that a rough
That
month?
happened actually here in California. It's
California.
been on the news. Yeah, in the Upland School District.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
Upland. Yeah. So they had some anonymous Valentine's Day cards that were going out to other kids.
I That's what I understand. I think there were some anonymous cards that went from one student and they were targeting students that were um, either biracial or um,
Okay.
other minorities.
Sure.
I think most majority of them were biracial. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was.
Yeah, and some
Were the
pretty.
were yeah. Were these Valentine's Day cards that had messages that were not appropriate?
Yeah, I think there are some
Yeah,
pretty
they were
racial.
handmade, and they had images. One said something like "You're my favorite monkey." The other one had something like
A
"You're my
reference
favorite
to
cotton
cotton
picker."
pickers. Yeah.
And they were
Wow.
all handmade, and the pictures were all. You can tell it was somebody that was,
Right.
a child drew them.
Right.
So that was that's a little disturbing. And the news,
Yeah.
according to the news, it looks like the children had been bullied and had experienced some of these kinds of things for some time. And so obviously the parents were concerned and they brought it up to the school board. And
Mhm.
so they've had some meetings about it. I don't know exactly if they've talked about if there's discipline, if they've decided or if they've figured out who it is that's been doing it or who's behind it or how this came about. But and there's but I know that the superintendent said that they wanted to get to, try to figure out exactly what happened
Right.
and, get to the
Right.
bottom of it. So what exactly that means is has yet to be revealed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes right into this whole concept of everything that our society is kind of dealing with right now, and you look at something like that and you go, well, how does this really come to fruition? And it tends, you know these types of things are not in a vacuum. It's not just a one-off. There's indicators, signs, and symptoms that lead up to this, that you should be picking up on, especially if you're a school principal or instructor at that site, right? That these types of things are being heard. And we kind of see this with the new SB 906 homicidal threat training, too, is that there's so many little indicators out there of violence, of racism, of inappropriate harassment and bullying that looks like Matt's lost us here. Um, that you know this doesn't just sprout up overnight. There's a seed, right? And we have to be looking at that. And so we have to talk about what kind of training is important to figure out how to handle these types of issues. And then, where does the principal sit in this? Where do school boards sit in this, in the sense of their kind of knowledge of what's transpiring in their schools? And how do you create that environment where there's not tolerance for this kind of behavior, but also doesn't just throw students away, and that's the challenge. And I think looking at some of the indicators, we just talked about the SB 906 on the homicidal threats, Matt. How do you handle these? Well, this is even more prevalent than that. So, these signs and symptoms, you and I are out in the field a lot, and some of the things that we hear when we're doing classroom audits, like science lab classroom audits, and we're going through science labs, and we're just listening, or maybe we're doing some mapping of emergency evacuation routes or stuff like that. Some of the stuff that we hear is really outrageous, and you're like, what is going on here? And that's coming out of instructors' mouths. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing how the school district handles this, but it really brings to mind some of the ethical issues and what the school boards are supposed to be doing. We saw that once COVID hit, and there was this political divide between COVID masking mandates and vaccine mandates and staying home and the distant learning and all of these things. Like there was a lot of division on school boards and a lot of overstepping of ethical bounds, I would say. And in California, it's pretty clear what the duties of a school board are and what they can and cannot do and how they should go about achieving that. So this is what makes this difficult. Like I think the school board really needs to be highly involved in this discussion on this Valentine's Day issue. It's it's a major blemish against the district. But how does a school board member get out and about to the school sites and really get an idea of what's going on? Because a lot of principals don't want their school board members at their sites.
They do not. They definitely do not. Yeah.
It's like, why are you spying on me? What's going on? What did we do wrong? And again, maybe that would lead to a better, what would you call it, understanding of what the environment is like and what your citizens, members of the district, community members, those that are sending children to that school, what they actually are looking for from an educational experience. So
I know what they could do.
What's that, Joan?
They can hire your team to go out and help with the training.
Yeah, I think you should do the DEI.
There you go.
The SB, the new one. What is it? SB 906.
SB 906. Yeah.
Get all that training. Get all of them prepared so that they know how to handle it.
That is the biggest shameless plug. Well, I think,
what is this? Well, what else are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting though, because you're a perfect person to teach a lot of the sensitivity. I mean, you do teach a lot of the sensitivity training and the equity and inclusion type issues, customer service issues, and I do think it's important to teach that. But I think also at the parent level, like we always advocate parent nights too, and you can't do just one. You have to do multiple, because a lot of parents work at night and a lot of them are busy and other things going on, and so getting that out there. But how does something like this even come about? That's what, like, where does a child think, oh yeah, where do they get that idea from?
It's a good question. I don't think kids are born that way.
Oh, I know they're not born that way.
I don't think they're born that way. So it's picked up somewhere. Um,
100% they're not born that way.
yeah.
And I remember when my daughter was very young, 1, 2, we'd go out to restaurants, and we would sit down at a restaurant, and there would be a couple with their baby next to us, or toddler next to us, and the kids would just, sometimes Madison would go over to their table, sometimes people would come to our table, and they just share their food, and they talk and they play. And I always used to
Right.
say to my former wife, like, at what point do they get that piece ingrained in their head? Where does that come from, that they don't like a particular population? You know,
Yeah.
and it comes from the parents. It comes from the
Yeah.
They're learning it someplace. Definitely
yeah,
they're learning, they're
Yeah.
getting it, and it's become an okay thought to have.
right,
But it's that just, people are able to, as long as you're breathing, you're able to make different choices as you get older.
yeah, absolutely,
And so hopefully it's not too late, and that the kids that were involved in this will get some needed support so that they can understand and turn that corner, and this becomes a great learning or teaching exercise, and all the people that are involved will learn, and they'll be able to do better, because if you know better, then you do better.
yeah,
At least
absolutely.
that's what I was always taught.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
You should be gaining knowledge and using that in a positive way. It's like your superhero powers. Are you going to use it for good or evil? I mean, which one are you going to
Right.
do?
It just depends on which way that you want to go with it. But I think it's good that it's um, public information, because then everybody can take a look at it and learn from it, learn what they shouldn't do, or what's not appropriate, and really take into consideration other people, because the the visuals of the children that were affected by it, oh, they were just
Oh,
heartbroken. They were very upset.
of course.
Yeah.
And the parents were very
Right.
upset too. And so I don't know if that's even taken into consideration when these kinds of things happen, when they're drawing it. Are they thinking that it's just a funny, or if it's just a joke? I mean, it's clearly
You
not.
know,
I
you
was
know,
offended when I first saw
Mm.
it, so I'm
yeah, I
wondering,
know
where did
you
that
were.
come from,
Yeah.
Right.
and how do you fix that?
Well,
How do we help those children to learn that this is not appropriate, even if they might be getting the
yeah,
opposite message somewhere else?
right. I think the thing that makes me so sad on this topic, especially with this particular incident, is when when I used to work for a JPA, and that JPA actually worked with that district, and so many times we would look at how do we kind of control these risks, right? And we see it all the time now. You see with uh, food poisoning and certain substances that shouldn't be in foods. So the kids have birthday parties, and you can't bring sugar to the birthday party, and you can't bring homemade goods to the birthday party. So everything's got to be store bought and store packaged. Well, we saw this also with Valentine's Day cards before as well, because some kids would get left out completely, and then their feelings would be hurt. And
Right.
some of the messages like this, not this off color, but were a little inappropriate. So you know what they did? Everybody bought, if you had 30 kids in the class, everybody bought 30, and you just signed your name to it, and then you put them all in a pile with the teacher, and then the teacher handed them all out, and they all had to be store bought with pre-made messages, and it got really boring. And here's an opportunity for the kids to show a little bit of creativity, really, get involved in this Valentine's Day thing, which is fun, friends and all that. And now it's completely off the charts, ruined, and you just go like, oh gosh, I mean, is this where we're at as a society, where everything's just got to be so controlled and sanitized, and really just, robotic, in order for these types of things not to happen. And so you're right, Joan. Like, what do you do to bring this into a place where people can, um, enjoy? But I think kind of the problem would be that the messages still have to be screened. You know,
Yeah.
they have to be screened, and maybe they were. I'm so excited to find out what transpired in this particular case. To figure out what really happened and is the
Yeah, it would be interesting because I didn't hear whether or not these were cards that were made, during class time, or if they were cards that were made at home and then brought.
Right.
I mean, it's not, I know that I would, at my children when they were in elementary school, I looked at everything that they did all the time.
Right.
So it kind of makes me wonder, if this was being made at home, did they not understand it? Did they think, what were the parents thinking if they saw it? Or,
Right.
how did this come about and how did it get brought back to the school? If it was done in the classroom, did the teacher see it?
Yeah.
And what happened
Yeah.
there? And then, and even now, the question comes up is that the cards were there, the teachers saw it. So how did they not handle it at that moment?
Right. Yeah, and that's the question. And I think going back to that, it's so many times we talk about being attentive in the classrooms. We see this too, where you go out and you do an audit of the athletic fields and their gym classes out there, and the kids are, hanging at the basketball, they're playing on their phone, and the teacher's sitting on some bench somewhere looking at their phone and not paying any attention, and the supervision is really slim. And here again, I could see if this were a case where teachers were saying, okay, we're going to take some class time to create these Valentine's cards. Are they actually watching? Are they actually interacting? What are they doing during that time? And so many times,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever find out all of the details from this because a lot of it, I think it's because of the sensitivity of it. And, you're looking at, where did it come, where did it start? If it's in the classroom, then they got to talk about, teachers, and that's a whole other disciplinary action because of their employment status. If it's at home, then you're worried about the privacy of the individuals there. So who knows if we'll hear all of the story, but it's interesting how this came about. It's very, it is disturbing. But I hope that there's some resolution that can come of it. And I hope that we do hear that things get better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just kind of looking at this from a risk management standpoint, I think we got to really get back to the hostile work environment training, the sexual harassment training. We have to get in there. Obviously, SB 906 requires a whole level of training on homicidal threats and those types of things. And so that sensitivity training has to be done. You have to make time for it. I know that instructors are under immense timelines. They just don't have a lot of free time, union agreements, all that stuff that goes into it, but you got to make time for this. And you really have to understand that audits of the school site, like when Matt and I went and we did some audits of some of these schools, and we'd see these messages from students to teachers, and you're going, this is a real indicator of sexual abuse and molestation. Pills, we found pills in certain areas of the classroom, messages, pictures, these things are highly inappropriate, and every day that principal is there on that site, and vice principal, and the disciplinarian. And how do these things go unseen? Custodial staff see this on a routine basis when they're cleaning these areas. So how do they go unseen? So really identification, making sure you're doing your audits. We bring a real eye to that in the sense of what should be looked for and how to look for it. I think the sensitivity training that is done is phenomenal. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of it. And then you have to have some real serious disciplinary actions on these things when they occur.
Yeah.
And students, there has to be some type of program for students that go through this to make sure that, number one, the ones that are victimized by it have some emotional support there and get back to it, and that the ones that are doing the bullying and victimization have some, things that they have to face as well.
Right. And that's the other part of it, Steve, is that we'll have, a lot of the times these incidents and these things that happen are happening away from the eyes of teachers, away from parents. It's only the kids that know about it. So you also want to include in that training to make sure that the kids are comfortable speaking with someone in authority about it,
right.
Or obviously utilizing the anonymous call, the anonymous call options. There are a couple different programs out there for that, whichever district has in place, making sure that awareness is out there, that they know, hey, you can call for help.
Right.
Yeah. If you hear a kid saying something that is wrong or that hurts you, they're calling you a bad name or bullying you. The kids need to know that they have options, and the only way we can do that is by letting the authorities around them know so that they can make them aware.
Yeah. 100%. Well, listen, don't forget to join us on Udemy for some of our online training. And we also have the Dollar Training Club, which we just put out there, our new COVID prevention program training. I know Joan's trying to focus on making sure everyone knows about that. And don't forget to stop on by our blog. Check us out on YouTube and LinkedIn. Oh my gosh, we're everywhere. And with that, we will see y'all later.